everyone, this is update for October 15, 2024, day 965 of the war, end of the date update. Also catch up for October 14, 13, and 12. So first, since the US Treasury monthly report did not came out yet, so I will do that in the next video. I'm sure it will finally come out by then. Usually it actually comes around 7th, 8th, and or 9th of every month. I'm not sure why it's delayed, but it's not there yet. So I'll then focus a little bit more on macroeconomic situation. But today I'm gonna start with more military political update, and then I'm gonna switch to situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. So I'm gonna start actually first with Israel, because it's been in the news lately quite a bit. So I mentioned before that Iron Dome is not a guarantee, and it does not provide full protection. It does provide some protection, there is no question about it, but it's giving the number of rockets or missiles that being shot by, let's say, Hezbollah or potentially by Iran. The sheer number of those simply can overwhelm the system. I compared it to DDoS attack. And so another fact that supports this thinking is that US is bringing THAAD, which I think it's a high altitude area defense system, something like that. But and actually US soldiers to Israel to actually supplement or complement the Iron Dome system and potentially in expectation of the attack from Iran. Another news on this front is that there are news that Iran stopped any indirect negotiations with the US, so that really suggests that there will be more escalation coming, and obviously this is going to be from the side of Israel. So the likelihood that Israel will attack Iran is definitely going up, and especially if we take into consideration this anti-air system from the US, all of this evidence points in the direction of more escalation. Actually, I forgot one thing about this THAAD. The rocket, at least open official sources state that rocket costs about 12 or 13 million dollars. As you can imagine, Iranian rockets are a lot cheaper. Simply, even from economical perspective, it's sort of negative economically in the long run. So if and Iran can always shoot many more cheap rockets, then you can produce more expensive rockets. So just even from economical point of view, this is not the best solution. I would say suboptimal solution. Now let's switch a little bit to actually North Korea, Russia, and then Ukraine, because there's a lot of speculation about North Korean troops going to Ukraine or being on the ground in Ukraine, actually. I would say that this is very unlikely, and for very simple reason, because if we look at North Korea, it's say roughly 26 or 25 million people. Its rival South Korea has roughly 52 million people, so it's roughly two times more. So for basically North Korea needs all of its troops for themselves. If there is a war with South Korea, or if they decide to attack, which is very possible, South Korea, that they need sort of all hands or all boots in North Korea. So again, chances of North Korea sending let's say, the large number of troops to Ukraine are very slim. Let's put it this way. Nothing is impossible. I'm not saying that it's guarantee or anything, but it's let's say least likely scenario. At the same time, there is no, let's say, when there is smoke, there is fire, and so Russia and North Korea are in the final stages of signing mutual sort of like military pact, I would probably say, where so it's basically sitting, it's going through a parole process in Russian parliament, which to be fair is not really parliament, that they basically rubber stamp decisions by the Russian president, and we can be sure that it's going to get approved in short order. But at that point, North Korea and Russia have a formal agreement. So in case one country is going to get invaded, the other country can sort of will come to support, to help military-wise. So that actually probably more mechanism of formally admitting that North Korean weapons are being used by Russia, and sort of opening up floodgates for North Korean ammunition to Russia. That's most likely because Russian president really likes everything to be formalistically legally correct. So that's probably the driver behind this. I'm sure that there are probably some North Korean, call it, observers on the front line to learn experience, to have experience, to basically from a learning perspective for North Korean army. But again, I doubt that there is actual military units there. I would say it's more likely that they would come from China than North Korea. The same time, North Korea improving its sort of relationship or strengthening their relationship with China. So as you can see, this whole situation, this whole block of, let's call it, 4 countries, they formalizing the relationship between them, and it's becoming sort of more concrete, more clear, more overt, as opposed to being covert. As you know, in the past we could only observe actions and make sort of observations from there. Now it's sort of in plain sight. I'm going to switch a little bit to more tactical update, and it's not related to specific section of the front line. So I'm going to just got to discuss it in general. So there are a few important observations. One is this Russian turtle tanks that being laughed quite a bit by Ukrainian propaganda and by Western propaganda, and they are absolutely sort of mistaken and wrong, because this approach actually works. So typically they can withstand at least 3 to 4 attacks by these kamikaze drones. Actually, they can withstand pretty well attacks by kamikaze drones. And the best way to destroy them is anti-tank missiles, which you need to expend a couple of those. So this, what I'm trying to say is this additional protection that being added, it actually has value, and it increases survivability of those armored vehicles. The only problem and why Russian troops are not using them widely, which would be very negative, is because it's also very labor intensive to add that stuff. So there is a trade-off, as you can imagine, and because not everybody wants to work hard, so many Russian crews, they don't do a good job, or don't do pretty much anything at all, and so that is sort of positive for Ukraine from that perspective. Then also want to mention a little bit about weather, because it's starting to affect military operations on the entire front line. There is thick fog in most places, drizzle. It got cooler. There's very wet. So, and these conditions, both sides are, well, mostly Russian side because they had full initiative. So they apparently took some time to refigure their own situation, logistics. Probably there's also it creates more problems for employing successfully gliding bombs. So there is kind of like a pause in Russian push. I'm not saying there is no Russian push, but it's I would say not as efficient and I would say weaker to extent. Not because it's weaker by its nature, but just because weather conditions significantly impair Russian efforts for now. The other sort of new development I want to mention is Russian kamikaze drone that uses fiber optic, and it's becoming more and more dangerous. Well, it's already dangerous because this fiber optic allows it to avoid any radio signal jamming, so no jamming works against them, and you have nearly perfect vision from them. And because this this fiber cable is attached to the drone, it actually can go pretty much anywhere. You can go with it anywhere, or I would say there's obviously limitations, but it's very maneuverable. A little bit less than the one without fiber cable, but there's a strong, significant advantage in the way that these drones are not susceptible to radio signal jamming, and they have very perfect vision, so you really can aim nearly perfectly. The only problem is probably distance, not as long. But within, let's say, 3-4 kilometers, 5 kilometers, it's an extremely deadly weapon. It's nearly guaranteed kill. And the other drawback of the system is they are somewhat more expensive just because of the fiber optic cable. So that adds cost, but at the same time, you also have nearly guaranteed kill. So that's probably worth it. And Russian troops are starting to employ them in larger quantities. The most sort of where most of them are employed actually in the Kursk region of Russia. For whatever reason, that's the epicenter, so to say, of employment of these drones. And this why this is another breakthrough, because all of the radio jamming is becoming obsolete. It's useless. In some ways, I always believe that the best way is to actually physically disable this drone, and that's really the only solution. And it's going to be quite challenging. There are obviously options, but there's significant amount of well, not significant, but there is need on R&D spend to figure out solutions for this, but they are pretty obvious. I don't want to discuss them here. So we kind of like opening another chapter in this drone warfare, and it's becoming sort of more deadly and more dangerous for regular infantry person. Another observation that's actually coming from also Ukrainian troops is that the wheeled vehicles in these conditions where everything wet and it's quite a bit muddy, they are a significant disadvantage. And unfortunately, Ukrainian forces got quite a bit of wheeled vehicles from West, and it's actually in these conditions, it actually puts Ukrainian forces in a disadvantageous position. Russian troops mostly, use old Soviet equipment, which is pretty much all of it tracked, because it's built as the lessons were actually learned from World War II, and even before World War II, there were proper lessons applied by the Soviet system, and they continued after World War II, and so there is a very clear advantage to having tracked vehicles. Now let's move to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine, and I'm gonna do walks through the front line in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do. And we're gonna start with Kursk region of Russia. So, as I mentioned, Ukrainian forces are in crisis in Kursk region, and Russian troops made quite significant advances. There's still quite a bit of unclear situation, so there's no sort of perfect clarity about it. But one thing is very clear, that Russian troops managed to squeeze Ukrainian forces from two sides. I mentioned last video, in one from Lugansk direction Novoivanovka, and then from Mala Loknyat, also in direction of Novoivanovka. So far, it does look that Ukrainian forces managed to sort of maintain very narrow corridor, but there is very high chance that this may be cut off, and the situation up north is very unclear. It's very possible that Ukrainian forces are withdrawing south towards in direction of Sudzha. So, as you can see, this is a first very clear sign that Ukrainian forces are gonna lose this bridgehead on the Russian side, and that eventually, I think this will be admitted that this whole operation was a huge mistake the way it's done. There was huge potential at the same time for this operation if it were done right, if Ukrainian troops would continue moving forward. But it's very clear that the way it was sort of planned, it was doomed from even day before it started. And I think in the next probably months or two, this will become much more clear. This is actually months ago when Russian attacks first started. So they finally made significant advances, as you can see, after months of the attacks. Now let's move. Let's look at the situation north of Kharkiv, where things essentially on pause. Nothing is happening here in this area. Now let's move to the situation on the North Lugansk front line, and things here more or less the same. Strong Russian pressure in the direction of Kupyansk. It's very possible that at least eastern side of Kupyansk is going to be lost in probably could be as soon as a month's period, but this is where it's heading. But as I mentioned before, the most dangerous development is Russian troops crossing Oskil River and establishing bridgehead on the western side. That would be very negative development for Ukrainian defenses generally in this whole area, and essentially would largely negate the achievements by Ukrainian forces in September of 2022 when they liberated significant portion. Well, essentially most of the Kharkiv region and a little bit of Luhansk region, and this all can potentially can reverse if this situation will continue. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Northern sector is fairly quiet. There's not much going on there. However, the southern sector, things are getting somewhat worse. I finally have confirmation that the Russian troops did establish bridgehead and pretty significant bridgehead on the western side of this freshwater channel. So they essentially crossed. the channel at this point, the progress probably going to be somewhat faster. The only question is if they have enough reserves to continue pushing in this area, just because their operations in Kursk region and then in the south in the central Donbass front line. That's probably the only, I would say, delaying factor for Russian advances. But again, more negative developments for Ukrainian defenses in this area. Now let's move to the central Donbass front line. Things here actually surprisingly kind of like on pause, and I would attribute it mostly due to the changing weather conditions, and that's really the only explanation that I can provide for all of this. So this is map from last video. There are some more, a little bit more advances of Russian troops towards this village Vishneva. So I would say Russian command is attempting to capture Selidovo in a very intelligent way. They're not trying to attack this town, to assault the town. They're essentially creating encirclement and will force squeeze of Ukrainian troops from Selidovo without really much of the fighting in the town itself, which is efficient way to obviously capture the town. So otherwise, things more or less stable on the entire front line here. Now let's move to Zaporizhya front line. Things here also more or less stable, with exception of this area in the Velyka Novosilka area. So Russian troops managed to capture village Levadne. This is where I'm showing it. It's tiny village. They used to control it before start of Ukrainian attacks in June and July of 23. So basically, they recapturing ground that they lost during that Ukrainian push. Now let's move to the final section of the front line, which is along the Dnipro River, and things here are absolutely quiet. Not much is going on here. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.